Inshallah, we want to start our program with the blessing of our Imam and to give the thawab of this program to him. So we would like everybody to recite Dua al-Faraj together, inshallah. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's good to see new faces among us and returning faces as well. So inshallah, before we start, let's go through the aims of our program. So we started last week by hadith by the Prophet, which said it was an obligation for us all to seek knowledge. And we looked at the tafsir of Surah Al-Alaq, the first 5 ayat, and we grasped 3 important concepts. The first one was what? Does anyone remember? The first ayah of Surah Al-Alaq. It was Iqra, what the meaning of Iqra was. We said the most important meaning for us is to see the lordship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all his creations. The second concept was the concept of alaq. Alright? And we said that alaq meant we were dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, completely dependent. And the last important concept was what the qalam was. That everything around us is writing on us. We're a piece of paper and the things around us are writing. And that's how we get the knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through his pens, inshallah. And so we said, if we want to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the route we're going to know him through is ourselves. مَنْ عَرَفَ نَفْسَهُ فَقَدْ عَرَفَ رَبَّهُ. So we also said, what does Lord mean? Is it the same as Allah? Well, no. It could be that we will discover that our Lord, or the person who has mastery over us, it's not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by discovering that, we can make that change and turn it so that it is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. So that was the aim of the program. And we're going to do it through a specific hadith. Do you guys remember the name of the hadith? Hadith al-Nafs, correct, by Imam Ali alayhi salam. So, given that's the premise, we're going to look specifically at this hadith. And the important concept from this hadith was the nafs. What is the nafs? There was a slight misconception of what this nafs was, alright? A lot of people in the answers said it's this metaphysical thing which exists inside us, alright? But that's confusing it with the spirit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِن رُوحِي. So this metaphysical thing is the spirit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. And inshallah, in our final lecture of the series, we will talk about the spirit and what it is inside of us. But that's not the nafs. We said the nafs was ourself. It's this thing that we refer to as the I inside of us. It is independent of the body, but it requires the body to exist. Alright? It can exist in the hereafter, but it didn't exist before the body. It needs the body so that it functions, inshallah. Alright, so the Imam says that inside of us, how many souls are there? 4. Do you guys remember what the 4 souls are? Yes? Correct, the plantic soul. Any more? Animalistic soul. The divine intellectual soul, which we're going to call the human soul for simplification. Yes? Yes, the divine universal soul, which we'll also call the universal soul for simplification. So inshallah, that's where we stand from last week. And this week we're going to take a bit further of this hadith, inshallah. We're going to talk about the plantic soul. Alright? So what does the Imam say about, and we said how they exist inside our body, how they're together. Remember that video we showed from Dragon Ball Z? About how Vegeta and Goku merged together, but they still exist as individuals? Well, that's how our souls also interact within our body. So, inshallah, we'll now move on to our plantic soul. All right? The plantic soul, this is what the Imam says. فالنامية النباتية لها 5 قوى: الماسكة، الجاذبة، الهاضمة، الدافعة، والمربية. So the plantic soul, the growing plantic soul, has 5 tools. So this word quwa, we're going to define it as tools. And what are these 5 tools? Holding or grabbing, pushing, digesting, and pulling, and nurturing. All right? And then the Imam says, وَلَهَا خَاصَّتَانِ الزِّيَادَةُ وَالنَّقْصَانُ وَانْبِعَاثِهَا مِنَ الْكَبَدِ. So it has 2 characteristics. So this word khasatan, we're going to call it characteristics. And there's 2 of them. What are they? Increasing and decreasing. All right? And its origin is from what we're going to translate for now as liver. But inshallah, we're going to look at what kabad really means later on. All right? Before we go to explaining this hadith, we need to define what tools and characteristics are. Because it's kind of confusing, like what's the difference between them? All right? And to do that, we're going to give an example. So this is a robot, but it's a specific robot. It's a pancake-making robot. All right? So its characteristic is that it makes pancakes. That's its characteristics. But it can't make pancakes with those hands. It needs tools. It needs a whisk for the batter, and then a frying pan to make the pancakes. Okay? So the difference between characteristic and tool is that the characteristics are what make it what it is, the function of that particular soul, all right? Whereas the tools is what it uses to be able to do this function, all right? So that's the difference between them. Inshallah, we'll apply that same concept to all the souls, all right? But we're starting with the plantic soul, so let's look at the characteristics of the plantic soul. All right, so we said these were to increase and decrease. What does that mean? That's what we're going to look at. But we know that it's a growing plantic soul. So there's something to do with our bodies or something growing, correct? And that's why it's really important to know when the soul was given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This soul was given to us at conception. When we are 1 cell, that's when we get this soul, because we require it to be able to grow and become humans. All right? So we'll look at these particular increase and decrease from a micro perspective first, because we start off as a single cell. All right? So what does increase mean in a micro perspective? It means being able to replicate, replace, and grow our cells. Mitosis. So for people who haven't got into mitosis in biology, it's pretty simple. What the cell does is it copies and pastes its DNA and then splits into 2. All right? And that's how a baby forms. They start a single cell and then it starts to become more cells until it becomes a human. All right? So increase sounds pretty useful. It helps us to grow. Why do we need decrease? So an example of micro-decrease is apoptosis. All right? Apoptosis is defined as programmed cell death, which means the cell gets told, you have to kill yourself, and the cell kills yourself. Why is that important? We're going to look at 2 scenarios of why that's important. The first one is when you're inside the mother's womb. All right? So when our hands first form, it's a single thing, all right? And then the bones for our fingers start forming. But between our fingers, between the bones, there's skin, which means that we can't use our hand properly. So apoptosis is then in play because it kills the skin in between each of the fingers. That's really important for us to grow, all right? Another example of apoptosis going where it's not in play is cancer. So cancer occurs when apoptosis does not work. All right? There's a cell and it's continuously multiplying and dividing itself. And there's no control over that because when the body's telling the cell to do apoptosis, it's rejecting it. All right? It's not working. So apoptosis, decrease, is as important as increase. All right? Now we're going to look at it at a macro perspective. So this is micro because we've just started as babies. Now we've grown. let's look at it at a macro perspective. When we grow from a baby to a child to a grown adult, that's increase, all right? For us females, the statistical peak is around the age of 35. After that, we start to decrease. And that's also important, all right? And this is why. So before, we start getting offended, we're going to look at a flower first and see why a flower needs to decrease, all right? So plants, they start off as a seed and then they grow. And in particular fruit trees, let's say, they become flowers, all right? They become flowers so that they can get pollinated. But once they are pollinated and there's a seed inside the ova of a flower, they need to get rid of the petals. They need to get rid of the stigma. Why? Because if it stays, the ova cannot grow into the fruit to protect the seed. If it stays, then you won't be able to have more fruit, more seeds, more plants. All right? So it's very important that the plant withers in this instance. Another example is when the leaves fall off. It's really important that leaves fall off because the plant cannot sustain itself in winter. It goes through hibernation just like, animals do. And so it needs to drop its leaves because it can't have that energy to sustain those leaves. But what happens? Those leaves then decay and they become the nutrients. It gets recycled back into the plant. All right? So what we're looking at is this wave-like motion. Small, big peak, and then small again, right? That's really important because humans go through that same wave-like function or structure. All right? And if we look at everything in the universe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, this is one of the equations of the universe. Study physics, study anything, and waves are the most important things. They're everywhere. And the Plantic soul controls that. All right? The Plantic soul is what defines what our life is, when it starts, when it ends. All right? Because the thing is, there's only one Hayy which stays forever. And it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He gives us life. And then we have to give that back to Him. Correct? I'll give you an analogy. And before I start, with every analogy, we're not limiting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to it. But we need to use it because our mental capacity can't understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fully. So this analogy is the ocean, all right? There's heaps of water in the ocean, correct? But these waves, they use the water from the ocean to increase and then decrease. The lifespan of a wave is tiny, correct? But we characterize them as part of this ocean. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this huge life giver, all right? We are single waves in that ocean. Single waves, up and down. The Plantic soul is what limits our time in this world, where this up is and where this down is. That's why it's super important. That's its characteristics, to increase and to decrease. Does that make sense? Cool. Now we'll move to the tools. Okay, so there were 5 tools, all right? And because we now know it's linked to growth, what kind of tools do you think we need for growth? What do we need to grow? Yes? Food, exactly. So 4 out of the 5 characteristics are actually linked to food, all right? So the first one was what? Al-Masika, the holder. It's our mouth. Our mouth is what holds food. Imagine when you're biting into an apple, what are your teeth doing? What is your mouth doing? It's grabbing a piece and it's keeping it in there. It's the holder. After the holder, what do you have? Al-Jadhiba, the puller. So that's our esophagus. Our esophagus is this amazing amount of muscles which contract like a toothpaste when you're like pulling out toothpaste, and it pushes everything into the stomach. So why is it called the puller if it pushes? Well, it depends on perspective, right? So when I push something, I'm moving it away from me. When I'm pulling, I'm bringing it closer to me. So if we're taking the center as our body, then what the esophagus is doing is it's bringing this food into our body. So it's actually pulling it towards us. That's why it's called the puller. And what does it do? it takes it into al-hadima, the digester, our stomach. So our stomach releases acids, which break down all our foods to their most, smallest components, smallest units they can ever be. All right? And after that, you have the dafa, the pusher. Why is it called the pusher? So your small intestine is in charge of pulling out all these small units that we can use in our body. But now that it's removing it out of the digestive tract, it's pulling it out, all right? And then the large intestine is pushing all the waste that we don't need out of our body, all right? So those are the 4 tools out of the 5. Now we come to a question. You are what you eat. A lot of people today are trying to debunk this, but the truth is it's scientifically very accurate. Because what happens is that, let's say you have this piece of steak and you're eating it, and now your stomach has digested this. It breaks it out to the smallest units possible, and these units are called amino acids, all right? Your small intestine then picks these up, and it creates it, and it builds it up so that it creates all these different things that we need in our body. It builds our muscles, which, almost all our organs are muscles. It also creates these things called protein channels, and they're pretty much the security guards sitting on, at the doors of your cells, letting the good things in and the bad things out, making sure that you don't bring poisons into your cells or that kind of thing. And then it also has this really important function of copying your DNA and then pasting it so that you actually make more cells in your body. Because you look at your skin and you think that it's the same all the time. But cells don't have a very long lifespan. They only last for around 8 minutes or so. So you're constantly making new cells all the time. But then this comes as a really important question to us. What happens if we eat haram, even if it was by accident? Does that become part of us? Well, if we're looking at the logistic sense, whatever food you're going to consume becomes part of your body. But does that have an effect on you as a person? If you go to a doctor, your doctor will say you're fine if you had a bit of pork. You may be intoxicated if you had alcohol, but other than that, your body is fine. But it affects something else. It affects your yaqeen. And that's really important because what that does is it changes what your form looks like in the hereafter. All right? So imagine this. Our souls, they can't really exist in this world by themselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them an avatar, and it's called our body. All right? And we eat to make our avatar. The hereafter is not the same world as here. And so we need another avatar for our souls to survive. How do we make this avatar? I'll give you another analogy. All right? So in this world, this is our vehicle. This body is our vehicle, all right? And food is the fuel we need to put into our vehicle all the time. And how do we put this food in? We use the plantic cell. So the plantic cell is the pump that we're using to put this food into the vehicle. Cool? So the same thing applies for our body in the hereafter. But we're actually building it now. We're building it with our actions. So our actions create the form of our hereafter, all right? So it's just the same thing. It's like our food. If we do something good, then we're going to make a good form. If we do something bad, that's going to affect our form. We might create a hideous form. If we do so many bad acts, our form may be really bad. And we're not talking here about looking bad, because we won't have these eyes to look at them. But we're talking about their essence, their existence. Their existence is going to be bad, all right? And if you do good things, you're going to have a really nice form in the hereafter for your soul to exist in. And then we look at, say shuhada. Why do they sacrifice this body? Why do they do all this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And if you look at it from this perspective, they're sacrificing this body because they know it's not worth anything. Their action is going to make their body in the hereafter so chivalrous, so amazing. And they're like, okay, we're going to live in that body more than this body. Because this body is controlled by the plantic cell. It has a start, it has an end. The other one over there, it's not. It's going to be our everlasting body. So we really do need to consider what we're putting into both these bodies, this body and the one in the hereafter. Because what we put into this body affects how we look like in the hereafter. All right? So next time you're buying anything, check the ingredients. All right? Sometimes it's really difficult. Sometimes if you're at a cafe and say you see this amazing looking cake, it looks chocolate, right? You're just gonna buy it. Maybe not check the ingredients. But if you knew that when we Googled this image, we typed in red wine chocolate cake, you'd probably think twice about it. So always check what you're putting in this body in terms of what you eat, but also check what you're putting in the body of the hereafter. Check your actions all the time. All right, so because the thing is, they build your body, and you don't want your body to be on flames, on fire in the hereafter. And inshallah, we're not in that position at the moment. But whatever we eat and what our parents ate, what our mother ate when we were in her womb, that's what's building us. All right? So now let's move on to the last one. We just talked about mothers. And the last one is the nurturer, al-murabbiya. So what is this soul? Or what is this tool? It's a tool of being able to raise and have kids. It's a beautiful thing for a mother to have a child inside of her and sustaining it. It's a beautiful thing that the parents instinctively know what to do with their children. Even Googling something, that's still because you're trying to look after that child. It's a beautiful thing, and it comes from the soul because plants do the exact same thing, right? It may not look like it because we don't see, plants, removing predators and that kind of thing, but they build fruit around their seeds to make sure that the seeds don't get ruined, correct? All right, so now that we've talked about the characteristics and the tools of the plantic cell, we need to talk about its origin. So it says that the origin is from the kabad. And ask any Arabic person to tell you kabad is the liver, correct? All right, let's just say it is the liver for a moment. Why would it be? Well, the liver is one of the most important organs of our digestive system. It is created when we're around 3 or 4 weeks in the womb, all right? So out of the 40 weeks duration, it's pretty early on, all right? And it has this ability to purify our blood. It has this ability to store all the important nutrients like the iron that we need for our hemoglobin to work so that we can breathe. Does a lot of that important things, all right? But that's only one of the definitions. Another definition that we found was that it's talking about all our internal organs. So how inside of us, we need all our organs, like the heart, the lungs, to function. And that makes sense as well with the plantic cell. But if we look at Surah Al-Balad, all right? So, لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد. What does kabad mean here? It doesn't make sense to say that it's a liver or our internal organs, correct? Well, the tafsir says that kabad here means hardship. Really hardship of what? Of this life. Alright? So this is saying that this soul originated when we came to this hard life, as soon as we became a single cell. So those are the 3 interpretations for kabad. And they all make sense. Alright? Say salawat if everything makes sense so far. Alright, so now we'll move on. Now we understand what this plantic cell is, its characteristics, its tools, when it comes, and where it comes from. Why do we need it? Because it's one of 4 souls for us. To be able to understand why we need it, we need to look at a creature which only has this soul. I mean, the first question we have to look at, is there a creature which can only survive on this plantic cell? What do you guys think? Plants. It's kind of given in the name. Plants only have the soul, and they survive because it helps them to grow and reproduce. I mean, isn't that all a plant does? Well, we ask the Quran again. When we have a question that we don't know, we ask the Quran. And in the Quran, in Surah Al-Naml, we have these two ayats that explain what a plant does. Alright? هو الذي أنزل من السماء ماء لكم منه شراب ومنه شجر فيه تسيمون. Alright, so that's saying that we have brought rain to you so that you can drink and so that you can grow crops for your animals to eat. Alright, and the second thing is, the second ayah says, ينبت لكم به زرع وزيتون ونخيل وعناب من كل الثمرات إن في ذلك آية لقوم يتفكرون. So it's also, this is the important word, for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made plants for us. Alright? They don't have any other function. Why is that? So we want to introduce this concept called the stages of ascension. Alright? And what this is how close we are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alright? So matter is at the bottom, because matter doesn't have a soul. Alright? And then we come to plants. Plants have a soul. So they're at the bottom for this at the moment. Alright? After them we have animals, because they have 2 souls. And then comes the human, because we have 4 souls. But the thing is, there's even stages beyond humans. The perfect human, that's the final stage. That's the closest thing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that people have gotten there. Our Prophet, peace be upon him, the Imams, the other prophets, they've reached that stage. Inshallah, that's what we're aiming towards. Because the purpose of every creature is to go up this hierarchy, to get to that closest position to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because all creatures love Allah. But how? So what plants do, yes, they help, they lead to animals, but the thing is they also lead to humans. We can eat them directly. So for a plant to ascend, there's 3 ways it can do it, alright? The first one is to be consumed by animals. Because what is happening is when it becomes consumed, it becomes part of the body of that animal. It becomes part of a greater existence. So it's ascended by then. It could also be consumed by us. It becomes part of our body and it also ascends in that way. Or it can develop or evolve animal-like characteristics or characteristics of a stage higher than them. An example of that is the Venus flytrap. Alright? So the Venus flytrap, it does the exact same thing that any other plant does, but in a different way. Alright? So instead of digestion in the way it takes nutrients from the roots or it photosynthesizes, it actually traps insects and uses acid chemicals to remove all the nutrients it requires from those bugs. That's something that other plants can't do. So that's what we mean by evolving animal-like characteristics. Alright? So the benefits of the plants. Alright? We use them. They want to ascend. They want to reach closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a duty for us as the Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth to understand the purpose of these beings and to help them and aid them. So we should, help them. Make them part of our body so that they can become part of us. They ascend by doing that. Alright? And then their other purpose is to spread so that they give more opportunity for us to eat. More opportunity for them to ascend. Does that make sense? So there's no point of, we say there's no point, but vegans or vegetarians, what they're actually doing are preventing animals from being able to ascend. And I don't think we have a right to say which creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can get closer to him, right? We condemn completely any animal cruelty and bad behavior towards them, but we should be able to make the judgment whether or not they can become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alright? So a plant to be able to do its purpose, all it needs is the plantic cell. But our purpose is greater, so it's not enough for us. But what the plantic cell does for us is it allows us to grow so that we may fulfill our purpose in this finite time that the soul gives us. Alright? And we're going to end our lecture here because it's Salah time. So, صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.